More than a dozen survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse have accused First Lady Melania Trump of, quote, shifting the burden after she called on Congress to hold public hearings with victims. In a statement released last night, the women said they had already shown extraordinary courage by coming forward, filing reports and giving testimony, and asking more of them now is a deflection of responsibility, not justice. Here's Marina Lacerda, one of Epstein's youngest survivors, and a person who signed on to that open letter.
Nobody has done nothing. But yet, you want to re-traumatize us and ask us to go in front of Congress and tell them our story, which we've had told some of them already. So now you want us to tell them again, under oath, and re-traumatize us, and then do absolutely nothing. That sounds like a shitty idea. It sounds like you're just trying to shift attention from something to something else. So how does this benefit the Trump family is my question.
And joining us, senior reporter at The Bulwark, Will Sommer, and MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. Lisa, the survivors clearly want accountability and justice. They have made that so plain over the course of the last year. Are the First Lady's comments bolstering or hindering their push from what you know?
I would say, Antonia, that many of the survivors with whom I speak feel similarly to Marina. I know Marina. She was minor victim one in the 2019 indictment of Jeffrey Epstein because she was abused by him here in New York, starting at the point in time she was 14 years old. And many of them, particularly people like Marina, who have shown up on Our Air and others, women who have been participants at press conferences, who have talked to the press at great length, they feel like they have already carried more than their share of the burden. They wanted more answers from Congress and from the Department of Justice, not another opportunity to be heard. And so, yes, there are probably some survivors out there that are appreciative of the First Lady's attempt at recentering their stories. I don't think anyone would say that recentering the survivors is not a good idea. But to the extent that that comes at the expense of further meaningful investigation of who was responsible for the abuse that these women have already endured and their trauma, absolutely not. You will hear more and more folks like Marina, although she is perhaps more candid than some, just that frustration and that underlying unease with what they feel is an incomplete, shoddily run investigation, both on the congressional side and at the Department of Justice, Antonia.
Will, do you think the First Lady did this for the survivors' benefit or for hers?
I think the latter. I think it's clear that, she's trying to get ahead of some kind of story here, so she talked a lot about, you can't trust images you see online. It's a little unclear what she's referring to. She made very clear, she said, I didn't have this close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He didn't introduce me to Donald Trump. We know the writer Michael Wolff has made these claims. As Melania Trump she already mentioned, she's earned retractions or apologies from HarperCollins UK, from the Daily Beast over sort of similar claims about her relationship with Epstein. It's sort of hard for us to judge right now, I think, what exactly she was getting out ahead of, but clearly she's trying to put the spotlight on something else in the Epstein relationship ahead of, I think, perhaps it seems to be some sort of bombshell reporting she's concerned about.
Lisa, remind us, what are the actual facts? What does the evidence tell us about the relationship between the First Lady and the President and Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, I want to separate between the First Lady and Donald Trump where it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, because Melania Trump has said that her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell was casual and social. It's probably more than she allows, but certainly less than what we have documented with respect to her husband. And let's go back to the journalist Michael Wolff, who had recorded many hours of tape with Jeffrey Epstein in 2017. Epstein is on those tapes saying that Donald Trump was his closest friend for 10 years. Donald Trump has certainly tried to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein, but there's no doubting the fact that in 2002, when, for example, Jeffrey Epstein was first sort of coming to the forefront and capturing the public imagination, people wanted to know, who is this guy on the social scene? When New York Magazine covered him for the first time, who did Landon Thomas go to for a quote? Donald Trump, who said that Jeffrey Epstein liked beautiful women perhaps as much as he did, although on the younger side. Those are not the words of somebody who doesn't know Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, we have the Palm Beach County Police Chief at the time who spoke with SDNY prosecutors and the FBI in 2019, saying Donald Trump had in fact called him and said, "Thank you for reporting what everybody here already knew." There is definitely, Antonia, some distance between whatever the relationship was between those two men at the time and what Donald Trump knew and what he wants us to believe now that relationship was. And perhaps Melania Trump's efforts yesterday are meant to distract us from that, or meant to distract from further focus on her. But they're not quite doing the job. If anything, they're only shining the light further on the Trump's association with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
Will, I was on air yesterday as all of this unfolded, and my first question was sort of, who was this for? And isn't there a potential for a Streisand effect here? You know, people weren't thinking about Melania and Epstein at the time. A whole lot of other things going on in the world at the moment, but now they certainly are. How do you think the president, Todd Blanche, the DOJ, are reading all of this after they had made so clear that they wanted to move on from this, that they saw this as a PR headache, an Achilles heel for the president? The president even told my colleague Jackie Alamany that, you know, he didn't know that this was happening. It seems incredibly strange for the First Lady to put her husband, the president, in this position and kind of push that daylight between them.
I mean, it was an incredibly strange press conference. And as you said, I mean, the fact that Donald Trump is saying, well, I didn't know this was going to happen. The fact that the First Lady is saying, well, you know, actually, maybe we should get more of these Epstein stories in congressional hearings, or these survivor stories. It's extremely strange. I think it's one of the strangest, you know, White House press conferences we've ever seen, or press events. You know, I think, as you said, there's this difference because on one hand, you have Melania saying, you know, we need more investigations, we need more information. And on the other, you have Donald Trump, who was constantly saying, you know, who cares about Jeffrey Epstein? This is old news. He only released the files after his hands were forced by Congress. Todd Blanche, who had this interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, that, you know, where he's essentially said, oh, you know, so the president didn't do anything wrong, right? And she said, yes, gets moved to a cushier prison. So it's a very strange situation. And I think it does feel like the First Lady is trying to distract or somehow sort of get the Epstein pressure off of her, which, to be frank, I don't think we even knew it was on her in the first place.
Seems like it might be on her now. Will Sommer and Lisa Rubin, thank you both so much.